Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Step Change in Safety COVID special webinar. My name is Emily Taylor and I'm going to be your virtual host today. And I'm going to talk you through some basic housekeeping for how to use the software. Shortly, you're going to see the panel. But if you want to ask the panel a question, you have a tab on your screen which says questions. You can utilise that to send them in. They will be sent in directly to myself and to Steve Ray. And if you want your name to be mentioned, then please state that in the question. Otherwise, they will all be anonymous. You won't hear from me again until there's 5 minutes to go. So I'll pass you over to Steve. Steve Ray. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And welcome again to you all for attending our webinar today. I'm delighted to chair this webinar on behalf of Step Change in Safety. And our panel today includes members of our Step Change in Safety leadership team and its tri-party composition. I'd like to introduce you to the panelists. We have Dale Checksfield, who's our co-chair in our Step Change in Safety OEM network and is also a OEM for Chrysaor. We have Bob Egan. Bob is the HSSE Workforce Engagement Specialist and is also on our Step Change in Safety leadership team. We have Jake Molloy, who is representing the RMT union and again is a member of our leadership team. We have Trevor Stapleton, who is the HSSE Director for Oil and Gas UK, who is also on the leadership team. And we have Craig Wiggins, who is the co-chair of our Step Change in Safety leadership team and is also Senior Vice President for Global HSSE for Aker Solutions. So welcome to the webinar, gentlemen. The aim of this important webinar is to provide a forum to the wider workforce where they can pose questions and concerns directly to the panel. We will endeavour to answer all factually and as well as possible. We will endeavour to answer as many questions as we can in this 1 hour session. However, should some of the questions not be responded to, we will, as a matter of course, publish the responses to them all on the Step Change in Safety's frequently asked questions page on the Step Change in Safety website, which will also be shared on OGUK's website. So with that, I'd like to begin by asking the first of the questions that we will pose to the panelists today. This one is for Dale Checksfield, and what is being done about only having one medic offshore, as they are more than likely to come into contact with potential COVID-19 symptomed victims? What are we doing from a mitigation point of view, Dale?
Clearly, the pictures vary across all the operators. So each of the operators has a requirement and a duty to make sure that they're putting appropriate barriers in place to protect people. That's the whole of the workforce and also the medics. So I know across the industry, we've got a lot of additional PPE being put in place to support medics. There is an issue in the supply chain of medics. Clearly, a lot of medics have now gone back towards helping the NHS. So I know some companies have already arranged with their medical providers that they have additional medics on short notice call off. So they're able to deploy should one of the medics become ill. Some companies have increased the number of medics. Again, it's very different picture depending on the different operator, the construct of their platforms, the space and availability they have of medics. But we can be reassured that all of the operators have plans in place to make sure that the important medical provision to our offshore communities is in place.
And Steve, perhaps I could just jump in as well, because obviously the UK run the pandemic steering group. That issue of medics has been raised because they're pretty critical offshore. So as a collective, we're looking across industry to see if we could help in some kind of pool arrangement, so that it's not just this is my company, this is my medic, but we have some medics that we could share. And in addition, I've raised today with the government sort of resilience group about whether we could, and nothing's guaranteed, but if we were, if we did have particular issues, would we be able to avail ourselves of military support? So typically, a lot of times, offshore, the medic was sort of got ex-military background, so I've asked to provide paramedic if we was really against the wall, notwithstanding all the other safety issues that might be accompanied with that.
Thank you.
Can I just comment on that as well, Steve?
Yes, please do, Jake.
Just a thought, listen to Trevor speaking there. We've actually got diver medics who are volunteering for NHS right now. So if there's a shortage of medics offshore, then we could probably draw down on the pool of diver medics that are available to us. A lot of them are sitting at home right now.
Thank you. Thank you, gents. We're going to move on to the next question, and this one I'll pose to Bob Egan. Bob, how is safety and environmental critical elements assurance being managed, particularly when the HSSE are no longer going offshore to carry out audits and inspections?
Well, obviously that's still of critical importance at the moment. Keeping, maintaining safe operation, that has not changed because of COVID-19. There is some temporary measures on with HSSE at the moment on how we are doing inspections. We're going to do inspections remotely, so that potentially won't involve going offshore, but if there's a need to go offshore, HSSE will still go offshore. But realising the difficulties and the exceptional circumstances we're all working under, we will be trying to do these inspections remotely. So that will certainly still include speaking to key people, but certainly for the workforce, it will be speaking to the safety reps and also the key members of the offshore workforce, should that be required. So inspections will still be happening, but they'll be getting done remotely. But if there's a need for HSSE to go offshore, we will be going offshore. But we'll try and avoid that at all costs.
Thank you, Bob. A comprehensive answer. Thanks very much. We have a question coming in online, which I'll pose to Trevor. Trevor, do we think it is acceptable that the industry has not agreed a standard approach for screening, testing on and offshore at this time?
Yeah, so I think we're developing the protocols that will cover the two types of tests. The two types of tests are the antigen, so the typical, and then the antibody, which is the finger prick test. And let's be very clear about the finger prick test, that the government has not validated any finger prick test at the moment. As soon as they do, we will be certainly grabbing it. So these protocols will be a standard, and they'll talk about how we use swab testing. So we are finding that some operators, they are doing swab tests for those people that are coming back on shore that are suspected cases. But we're looking at the sort of bigger picture in terms of what could we do if someone's at home, because it's probably far better that they get tested at home prior to when they're going offshore, etc. So they could go to the local boots, etc. Get their swab test and then get the results, and then come to travel to the heliport knowing that they don't have COVID-19. But those protocols have been developed, and as soon as the government say cleared the decks in terms of the NHS, because we are not doing anything that will jeopardise the frontline NHS support. But as soon as the government says yes, we feel that we've got the NHS address now, and now we need to move on to the critical workforce, then we are ready to sort of move forward on a standard protocol for either the swab test or the finger prick test.
Thank you. Thank you, Trevor.
I think if I just add into that, Steve, where we're seeing some of the operators who have commenced or are in the process of developing testing facilities, what's taken the time around that is making sure that we really get a reliable test, ensuring that where we do offer testing to people, that those results are reliable and repeatable is of massive importance. The worst thing that could happen is we come out very early with an unreliable test people and put people into a false sense of security, or arguably increase the risk. And I think Trevor makes a really important point as well. The operators that have started developing testing processes have been really key to ensure that we're not diverting any resources from the National Health Service, and making sure that the solutions that we have in place don't detract from that nationwide effort to protect those most vulnerable in our communities.
Thank you, Dale.
Just one other point there, Steve, on the testing. We've already had an operator who's done testing and actually got several positive tests, but in actual fact they're not positive. And this, I don't want to complicate things, they're false negatives. They are in fact negative tests, so that the testing isn't actually 100% reliable yet either. So there's a bit of work to be done there, but it's good to hear that move towards a standardised approach. I think that's absolutely critical. And can I just be clear, Steve, I'm actually representing the offshore coordinating group, so there's 6 trade unions behind me, probably are sitting watching this as well. This is why I mentioned it.
Thanks, Jake, and I think it's important you clarified that, because we know we have the unions sit on the step change leadership team, but we can't have them all at the same time, so it's good to have a representative. Thank you. Okay, on as a question came in on demobilisation or Medivac, where do I go? What are my options if I cannot go home because I have confirmed or I'm highly likely to have been in contact with someone who has the symptoms? I think we'll have to put that one to Trevor initially. Yep.
Thanks, Steve. So what we've done, so I mentioned the pandemic steering group, and beneath the pandemic steering group were a number of subgroups. And what we formed this week was a logistics subgroup, and they're looking at the concepts of safe haven, so hotels that could be available. And we've done some work before the subgroup was formed. So we've identified hotels that are open, certainly in the Aberdeen area, that could take just generally people or people that are suspected cases. But recognising that Aberdeen's not the only place. So you've got Blackpool, you've got Humberside, you've got Norwich, we're looking at Inverness to support Invergordon, and then we need to look at the sort of Somerset side of things. So at the moment, the group's looking at the safe havens, and they're not without problems. We know that there are certain situations here, people turn up, things are not quite clear. So we're trying to address those and make sure that we are consistent. So the safe haven side of things has been looked at, and now also this concept of safe passage. So in terms of the worker leaving their home, getting to the heliport, and then coming back and going back into their home. A number of operators are also looking at that, but we're trying to work with those and a couple of support companies. But they're saying, right, we could have some offers out there that may be robust enough and be able to be adopted by industry. So it's recognised, it is a concern. But be assured that there is a group now, really positive group, looking at these very issues.
Thank you, Trevor. Any further comments from the panel on that?
Just the transport side of it, Steve. We've had 9 members on the transport side have died as a consequence of coronavirus. Bus drivers and train drivers. So everybody's very, very nervous about it, and the transport side, what travel to and from, is absolutely critical. But I know there's some good practice out there as well, and we can, as Trevor said, we can try and standardise that as well with a hope.
Thanks, and I think that just emphasises the need for every individual, regardless of whether they're onshore or offshore, who is considering travelling when they may be susceptible or have an inclination that they might have symptoms. There's a bigger impact on everyone that's involved who may come into contact with them. So please, we all have our part to play in managing this disease and keeping the numbers to a minimum. So just reinforcement there. I'd like to move on to a question that is onshore based, but affects us as an industry just as much as the others. This is to Craig Wiggins. Craig, what additional measures and checks are being carried out for ad hoc service contracting employees who are being mobilised, possibly from onshore facilities or manufacturing facilities, to work offshore ad hoc?
Yeah, so basically we're compliant with the national guidelines. Certainly it's very much about if you're exhibiting symptoms, you actually go into full quarantine. And obviously as companies, we're having large communication exercises around making sure that that's the case. We've looked as an industry and certainly as a company into testing, and really it's very much about the same processes that we're doing it from a UK perspective. We really don't want to divert any resources from our National Health Services, and we're making sure that we're in line with everything that's going on in the UK from a national guidance perspective. So in reality, we're following the national guidelines. We're encouraging our staff to self-isolate if they have any symptoms. And obviously we're making sure that we have that communication across our whole industry.
Thank you, Craig. Trevor, just I know Oil and Gas UK or OGUK don't just look at the offshore workers side of it, they're looking at the onshore supply chain as well. Have you given any guidance to potential ad hoc workers who are based onshore going offshore?
No, in answer to that, probably a missing in terms of a focus. We'd point everyone in terms of, well, go to the OGUK webpage and you've got a lot of the guidance there. And I think it is regardless of whether you're offshore, etc., or onshore. I think that the guidance that we offer would probably suit all of you. But I think it's right what you also said is that in terms of individual accountability, some of that guidance is available to everyone if you just go on the government website. And I think it's incumbent on everyone to take personal accountability and make sure they're up to date with all the information.
I do think that's a big part of it. People need to take personal accountability for this issue. If you have the symptoms, do the right thing.
Good reinforcement there. Dale, let me come to you, Dale. What in the offshore environment, because I know you're an OEM and you've been heavily involved in this, what additional checks can people expect to see, or what can I expect to see as an offshore worker when I return to my platform after my time at home?
There's a huge amount of barriers that have been put in place by operators across the oil and gas sector. They range from temperature screening that's being conducted before people mobilise through the heliports, so having their temperature tested to make sure that they're not showing any elevated fevers. There's controls that have been put in place by some operators around reducing the number of people in any one aircraft at any one time. So the likes of an S92, some operators have reduced down to say 12 in an S92 to ensure that social distancing is delivered as best we're able to do, whilst we still keep people moving backwards and forwards. In terms of when people come offshore, clearly, as you'd expect, it's all the really basic stuff and the rhetoric that the government have been putting out of making sure we're keeping places clean, making sure we've got our own personal responsibility for keeping our hands clean. Some operators, or I think the vast majority of operators now have reduced the numbers of people that we have offshore to try and reduce that risk. And I think there's a really critical point here to draw out just some of the feedback we've got across the industry of why there's still quite a lot of people offshore. It's really important, despite the challenges that we have of coronavirus, that we're still effectively safeguarding against those major accident events. And I'm sure Bob and the HSE team will not be letting up in terms of the accountability they're holding operators to make sure that we're protecting the whole of our workforce and our environment against the consequences of major accident hazard. So on some platforms, the demand for safety critical personnel is higher by their nature or construct. We have to make sure that those risks are mitigated. Some of the questions I've seen coming through is, why have we still got a drilling crew doing drilling work on a platform? Well, it may be actually that the risk of not doing that drilling work could be higher than having the people there because the well may have an integrity issue. So in terms of answering your question, and sorry, I was just trying to give a bit of a flavour of the broad spectrum of stuff that's being done offshore. I'm confident that every operator is taking the steps that they need to try and protect the individuals that are working offshore. All of our personnel are key workers. The role that they're performing is critical to security of supply for the nation, and it's incumbent upon us all to make sure that we look after those personnel as best we can.
Thank you, Dale. Here's questions came in. It will apply to you, a couple of the panelists. What the government talks about key workers in critical services. So this is from an individual, I'm being deemed as not critical, yet my colleagues on other installations are. Is there a specific criteria for oil and gas workers, or is it down to the individual companies? And I think that could be a question for both, or for either Trevor, Craig, or Jake, actually, because it applies to all three. Craig, how would you perceive a critical worker?
So obviously the government has specified that oil and gas as a sector is a critical area, an essential area. And what we've done is we've looked at our operation. We've identified what we believe is essential. And in my company personally, it's about delivery of subsea equipment. So we've looked at our workshops in the UK, done in Reading and in Aberdeen. We've carried out a risk assessment. We've identified the people that we need to work. We've looked at things like the social distancing, flexible working, different shift working, cleanliness, and all these different things are in our risk assessment and being mitigated. And obviously these people have been issued with a letter so they can travel to work to say that they're an essential worker on the delivery of those services. For everyone else in our organisation, I think the vast majority of people are people who potentially could work at home or are not deemed essential, and they're working at home at the present moment. So we've really looked at our whole operation and identified who we think is essential in delivering services that our clients need. And then we've actually put a risk assessment in place, and I'm pretty sure all of the organisations are doing the same thing within the supply chain.
Thank you. Thank you. Trevor, did you want to add some comments to that at all?
Yeah, I think I just support what Craig says. I mean, you heard Dale talk about minimum manning levels, and I think that's down to each individual operator to deem what its minimum manning levels are. And then when you get down to that, I think what we've been saying to government is basically minimum manning levels. If you're now working offshore, you're critical. And then there are some other add-ons in terms of, if you look at helicopter operators, they've gone through their list. Obviously, pilots are quite critical to the operation. So helicopter operators have come up with their list. The supply base, so that's a Vasco supply base, and being able to load the vessels, they've come up with their critical list. So that's the way that we've approached in terms of when we've been talking to government about who's critical and who's not.
Thank you. And Jake, finally on this one, I can see you've got some comments to add, yeah?
I think that the key was in the question about who's key and who's essential, and I think this is the problem we've got with the industry at this minute in time. Most operators, yeah, are reducing non-essential work, but not all, and this is where this dispute, if you like, this debate about what is critical and what is not is coming, and it's where it's arising. And picking up on all of that, what's essential, what's critical. Absolutely critical to keep the lights on and keep the power supply, but I mean, maybe it's time just for the next few months, if indeed we get through this next couple of months, just to throttle back a bit and just cut right back and go right down to absolutely safety critical manning, just to keep the installations ticking over. I think we've got to get there if we're going to stop the numbers we're seeing currently, because as long as we're getting numbers coming back showing symptoms, this debate is going to keep going. So I think we've got to get a grip on this essential worker, key worker piece.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a question come in from a marine seafarer, if you wish. Does the safe haven concept that you talked about, Trevor, does that apply to seafarers and those supporting the oil and gas industry at large?
I feel a bit exposed now because I would be pointing to the person that would be the outfit. You've got the British Chamber of Shipping, BROA, and then you've got IMCA, and I think they'd be in a better position to talk to why the sort of safe haven concept would apply to the marine or not. So it would be wrong of me to sort of say, oh yeah, it does, only for them to turn around and say, well, no, there's some differences.
Okay, and Jake, sorry, Jake, follow up on that one, because you're obviously your union membership and your colleagues' union membership is large and extensive. Are they doing anything out with the oil and gas industry around safe havens that we could learn from?
I think they could be doing more, perhaps, because what a lot of them have actually done is just extended trips. We've got some lads now into their 6th, 7th, 8th week on ships because they can't get the crew changes done. I was actually talking to Serco yesterday about the possibility of setting up a testing centre in the car park at Northland Ferries in Aberdeen, possibly to serve the port there and try and take the heat out of this and try and get those crew changes done. So there's quite a bit of work to be done there.
Okay, thank you. Just to change the tack slightly here, we have a question. We've got a couple of questions came in around the validity of certification and how long will it be extended for, and does it apply to all certification and training certification, or is it just some? Bob, from an HSE point of view, do you have any comment on that one?
Well, for your main medicals and survivals, there's extensions allowed for them at the moment. For medical, you're better consulting with the medical team on the place of work, because I think there is some exceptions for that. I believe the PETO website has got information on that, so it would be worth checking from this. But again, it's the thing that will run through most of this, I imagine, is the exceptional circumstances. There's exceptional things getting put in place at this time. and extensions at the moment on survivals and certain work-related competency training certs are getting extended.
Okay, and I also believe there's some additional links on Oil and Gas UK's website and our own regarding certification extension, etc.
Yeah. And I might just on the medical. So yeah, that's been extended. Our medical doctor is now looking at the sort of thorny issue around. So suppose when we get some new people that want to join, or maybe they've been they're out the industry for a few years and coming back. So how do we get them medically certified? So now doctor is looking at those very difficult problems to say, right, what's the next step going forward? But medical's extended, restricted. There'll still need to be some kind of assessment, but that's probably over the telephone.
Thank you. Question just came in on, we know some folks are being asked to stay on a bit longer to cover. Is there an absolute limit on how long someone can spend offshore if they're having to work additional days to cover gaps? I guess that would be from a compliance point of view, Bob, and also Dale from a on-board point of view. Bob.
Well, apart from the normal sort of allowances for extended stays through weather, which again could come into this later, the governing body for extending time offshore as be your working time regulations, but also what you've got in your safety case. So your safety case will be based on a point of time that your crew is normally working offshore. So if that's to be extended, then there's changes that come with that extensions. So how are you then managing the people's fatigue? How are you then managing the people's, at this time, certainly stress levels? How is it getting monitored? Now, there could arguably be some benefits. Oh, it's less travelling for people, so we're keeping our crew more confined in together. But there's a lot of other things that should be risk assessed and put into place prior to that happening. And one of them that must happen if you're making changes like that, because of the effects it will have on the workforce, is you've got to consult your safety reps. And that's not a nice thing to do. That's what must be happening. And it should be happening in consultation in good time. So that's like before the decision's made. You know, you've got to be able to do that. And it would then, you would have to get in touch with HSSE. So we would be looking for evidence on how that consultation's going and what's been done, and if everything's in place to do that. So there's a lot of ifs and buts to this, and then you start throwing in the chances of people going for compassionates at this time because of what's happening at home. Then I don't have an answer at all the parts to that, but it is quite. There's a lot of work to go in instead of just saying, right, we're putting more people offshore for longer, and that's it. There's a lot of work to go in prior to that, and then how you're going to manage it when it's happening, because at this time, people working longer is going to bring personal sort of challenges to people.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Dale, would you like to comment on that at all?
Yeah, just before I expand on it, I just want to pick up on a really important piece from an OEM's perspective, and I think I speak for my peers in this about the really important role that safety reps have in this whole issue that we're dealing with currently. I'm sure I have the confidence that most of my community of peers are having really open and transparent dialogues with safety reps, and if that's not happening, then safety reps have the ability to go to OEMs and ask for those conversations and dialogue. So, I'd encourage that through. In terms of, again, answering back the question around, how long can people be kept offshore? Again, it's really important that operators ensure that we've assessed all the risks. The whole situation at the moment is bringing a massive amount of challenge to everybody. Some operators have already had to adjust rotas to see extended period trips. The drivers behind some of that has been to ensure that companies are able to respond to short notice abstractions. So we're still seeing people, you know, the day before they're due to go offshore, are now having to put themselves in a place of isolation, where that individual is a safety critical person. Then there's likely or potentially an impact to their back-to-back. But as Bob says, it's around making sure that the operators are assessing the risk, looking at appropriate mitigations for how long that individual is being kept on, make sure that their fatigue's managed, and look for other opportunities that we can to make sure that we're still controlling our major accident hazards and complying with our safety cases. It is no easy feat, and some of the conversations I've had with my peers, it is a daily ongoing activity to make sure that we've got the right people in the right places to provide the right safety critical competence, but also making sure we look after people.
Can I say something, Steve? Yeah, go on, you go, Jake.
Yeah, it was just one point on that there's one coming up that's coming your way, Trevor, just to give you a heads up. That's the starting point. You know, when we've got somebody with symptoms who's being taken off, some of the operators are saying, well, everybody, that's when the clock starts for your 14 days for this self-isolation period to be sure that you haven't contracted it from the person who's gone off once they've got a positive test. But there seems to be differentials in how that's been done as well. When the clock starts, and does it start again when someone else tests positive, and so on? Because again, we've got guys now coming into their 6th week because the clock has started and it had to restart 2 or 3 times because of positive cases. So it's one to be aware of.
Yeah, just add to this. I mean, obviously I've been working with this across the globe, and having worked offshore for 20 odd years myself and being an OEM, this is really the crux of the problem, is this issue of fatigue, about how do the teams work together. And in actual fact, when you look at what's happening else around the world, you know, there are countries that are demanding 2 weeks isolation before they go offshore for a 28-day trip. And this for us as a company is absolutely really key. And the fact of the matter is we have to remember all the work we've done in the past with regard to human factors, about the pace of work we're doing, about the influence of people and how we do things. And this is really now about where we are as an organisation and as an industry, is how do we lead that? How do we use all of the things we've worked on in the past to make sure we do the right things now, and making sure that we understand the risk. And I think this is one of the key issues, because I'm very worried about fatigue, and it's important that that is always at the forefront of what everyone does every day in this situation, as you are looking at the guys, making sure that they're in the right place, and actually maybe addressing the activities and things that you do so that maybe you don't do those things at that particular time.
Thank you. Good comprehensive answers there. Just I think this will be a short question, but they're all important. Are there any platforms screening all offshore workers daily for temperature tests? And if so, are they demonstrating a benefit? I'm not aware that anyone is, but I'll put that to Trevor and perhaps Dale.
Yeah, so I understand that there are operators that are doing regular temperature checks. And in addition, the helicopter operators have asked for, even for category A, so that's normal crew change, that before they go back to the beach, that they are temperature checked as well. So I think a number of operators, and that was raised at the pandemic steering group. There was no argument to that, so it would be endorsed. So as far as I'm aware, a number of operators are doing temperature checks.
Okay, thank you. Dale, we'll leave that at one. I think that was quite a comprehensive answer. Thank you. I have a question from a commercial air diver. Excuse me, not a driver, a diver. A lot of diving jobs have been postponed. Once we get back to normal, in your opinion, are we likely to experience a very busy spell to catch up on the backlog of work? And I guess that would be, let's try that with Dale, because I'm sure you're missing some diving work right now offshore.
I think in terms of what does the picture look like for the rest of the year, I mean, clearly on our offshore platforms across the North Sea, we've reduced the amount of activity to be done. Some of that activity is discretionary, you know, it might be value add, it might be stuff that's opportunistic to do in this budget year. Some of it will be safety critical driven. I can't speak for every operator across the North Sea. I don't know their individual finances or safety critical burden, but it's clear that anything that we're not doing currently or we've deferred in terms of safety critical activity will still need to be picked up. We still need to make sure we mitigate and assure those risks. I think it's clear across this industry, as it is across many at the moment, that the issues of COVID are causing financial concerns. People are having to spend an awful lot of money now to make sure we protect people. What that plays out of in terms of the discretionary type work for the rest of the year, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment because the picture's too wide depending on each company. But I think the important thing is that, you know, the oil and gas industry is still here. We still have a job to do going forward. We still have a really critical role to play in the wider UK industry. So I can't reassure the individuals are concerned if there's a future of their job specifically, but we will still be here as an industry at the end of this. And pleasingly, we'll have come out of it learning some really important lessons to protect ourselves for the future, I would suggest as well.
Good. Thank you for that question. Let's take another one from the webinar cast. What is the industry doing to safeguard skills during this period? The large-scale redundancies during the last downturn didn't protect the skills needed in the industry, and what are we doing about that now as we're still playing catch-up? Jake, what's your thoughts on that?
Did you say Craig or Jake?
Jake, sorry, I do apologise. Yeah.
My thoughts on that, sorry. My thoughts are that we're not doing nearly enough, but that's no a criticism of the oil and gas industry, that's a criticism of government. I think government have let us all down and are continuing to let us all down in terms of the whole transition piece, picking up on the last point about the divers work. You know, there's going to be work available that isn't necessarily oil and gas. It could be in the renewables, it could be in the decommissioning. But getting government support to ensure that we retain the skills and transfer those skills still isn't materialising in any significant way as yet. So no is the answer. I don't think we're doing nearly enough, but that's not as a consequence of Oil and Gas UK. I think that's a consequence of government's ability to put the tier 1 contractors and the tier 2 contractors, put them in the frame for the work that's coming, and to ensure that we can get those skills, retain those skills, and transfer those skills into the other sectors.
So I'd just like to build that. So as a tier 1 contractor, you know, skills is it was an issue before, and now we've got a situation with COVID-19, but we've also got to remember there's the oil price as well, which is out there, and this is a perfect storm. And so reality, I agree with everything Jake has said. You know, we've been desperately trying to maintain skills and identify how do we support the industry going forward? How do we attract new people into the industry as well? And I think there is something around government support. We need to make sure that the skills that we need now are actually, you know, are actually still there in the future. And this is probably going to be one of the hardest things that the contracting community is going to have to deal with and solve. And I don't think we can solve it ourselves. It has to be across industry, but also with government support.
Thank you, gents. Question on helicopter travel. Expected to receive a few of those. Now that we're seeing some companies reducing their passengers on board, is it a likelihood that Oil and Gas UK will create policy or mandate for the rest of the industry on flight numbers? I guess Trevor, I'll have to come to you with that one.
I think it's not it's not a short answer, but one thing we have been doing all the time is that we've followed advice from Health Protection Scotland, governments, etc. And what the strategy has always been, first of all, can you demonstrate that the individual is asymptomatic? And we introduce the questionnaire, and that's why it's so important that if you are suffering symptoms, that you declare that on that questionnaire. You know, that you can be assessed accordingly and not try and hide it. You know, it's so essential because you just risk lives if you don't do that. And then we're doing the temperature checks. So we've demonstrated that individual is asymptomatic. And then when they go, if you listen to Health Protection Scotland, they will be saying that, and this is their words, not mine, that anyone who's asymptomatic, whether they've got the virus or not, it's a very low risk of transmitting the virus in any situation. Yesterday, we spoke about social distancing and accepted that it may not always be possible in a business setting to practice social distancing, and so they've accepted that. They came up with a few ideas of what you could do in terms of not facing each other and being away. So the bottom line is, we've not followed the Norwegian model because of that. There is social distancing for the air crew, but that's because they're flying all the time, and it's not just a trip. They're doing all the trips, etc. Having said that, I think we've recognised that there is a concern with the workforce in terms of travelling in helicopters. I'm not going to say too much, but I know that we are looking at some kit that wouldn't impact on the NHS. It needs to be assessed. We're going to try and test it in one of the Hewitt centres, because they're not doing training, but they could test this piece of equipment. And we're talking to the manufacturer. If that is available, if it all works, etc., and we talk with the helicopter operators, we could make that available, and I believe that would allay a lot of the fears and concerns about people travelling on the helicopters in terms of just limiting any coughs, sneezes, and things like that. If we do it, it's only it would be some kit that could be just used once, i.e. you wear it on the helicopter going out, and you wear it on the helicopter going back, and then that's it. You just then throw it away. But we are looking at that. I think if we can crack this, then I think that will alleviate a lot of concerns.
Thank you. Thank you. Dale, I have a specific question come in for yourself here. You described that safety reps should flag up and request meetings regarding COVID-19 with the OEMs. What would your advice be on how to approach your not so approachable OEM on this matter?
Hopefully, I've never been in a place where I've been that unapproachable OEM. Some of my previous teams might disagree with that. I think OEMs have a moral obligation. They also have a legal obligation to ensure that they're consulting appropriately with their SI 971 reps. And I'm sure that there are some individuals amongst my peers who might seem prickly, but ultimately, anybody who does the job that I'm doing, our key driver is to make sure that our platform and our people stay safe. My advice to the 971 reps would be to, pluck up, go and ask the question, because I think they would hopefully be pleasantly surprised with the response. If they're not, then and I'm sure Bob will support me, there are avenues that can be utilised via the regulator to leverage that. But I know certainly in the vast number of conversations I've had with my peers across the industry in the last couple of weeks, we're all trying our best to make sure that we're giving confidence to the troops that we're doing the right things. Clearly, we don't across the industry get everything right first time, and as Trevor and Craig and Jake and Bob have said, this is such a broad piece. It's brought a lot of challenge to us, but go and have that dialogue. And I'm hoping that doesn't open a question now for many of my previous people.
So can I just say, as someone who's representing Step Change and Safety, someone who's been an OIM and a safety rep at some point, the secret to this is actually talking and working as a team. So I hope there's very few prickly OIMs out there, but if you're not talking to your safety reps about this, you need to have a serious look at yourself.
Thank you, Craig. Bob, I have to come back to you as a workforce representative at HSE.
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with a wide variety of people that are safety reps and a variety of people that are OIMs. But like Dale says, the OIMs do have specific legal duties on this to consult. For safety reps themselves, I can't think all my time offshore as a safety rep and post-Piper for these regulations have been in place, probably where there's been a situation where good, active, involved safety reps has been needed as much as it's needed now. If the safety reps feel they're not getting through to the OIM, or the OIM's not dealing with their issues or concerns, there's always the HSSE concern line. You could contact HSSE either over the phone or by email. That's not changing. and anything comes in for safety reps will be dealt with very rapidly, certainly at this time, but always is from an HSE perspective. If safety reps feel there's an imminent risk to people's safety, then if two of them go to the OIM, it's then the OIM's duty to contact the HSE. You know, so they've got a duty to do that. So people should be aware of that. But people working together at this time is what it's all about. So your reps need to be talking to the people they're working with, their workmates, their constituents, their colleagues, but building up good relationships with the OIM. Certainly.
Great answer, and I think you've done lots to reinforce the role of an elected safety rep at this important time, and also hopefully you've helped those that raised the questions to enable them to approach their OEMs if need be. Thank you very much. Let me see, I have a question here on, with regard to ad hoc workers being medically screened and the prospect of no work and pay is falling or failing the medical screening, what can be done to support them honestly if they are honestly declaring to be unfit? Are we doing enough as an industry? Is the government doing enough? I guess a question. Greg, I'll take it to you for ad hoc workers and we can go to Trevor for the general.
I mean, obviously, this is a really difficult question. And, you know, at the present moment, there is the cover of sick pay, which is obviously clearly maybe not enough. But what I would do is I would actually go back to individual companies and have a conversation with the people who've been mobilising you about this situation. But it's not an easy question, and you know, there is provision there, but you know, I think you need to go back to the individual companies as well and seek guidance.
Yep. Jake, yeah.
I was just going to say, Steve, that there was a bit more guidance come out from government yesterday about furloughing, and they broadened it out to the extent that if you've got someone who requires your support, you can be furloughed. If you yourself are a shielding worker, you can be furloughed. So the government support is there in terms of 80% up to the cap of £2,500 a month for a wide range and a wider range now of workers than was previously the case. So if you've got any doubt, contact the trade union or contact your employer and ask about furlough.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Question came in here about, and I guess this is not a simple answer, what precautions are being taken offshore when there is a crew change due in a couple of days and you're not sure if those coming onshore might be carriers? How would you protect your people going inshore? Dale, any specific advice around how you socially distance and screen during these periods of times?
So I think you touched on the key piece there, Steve, is social distancing as best we can in the confines of an offshore environment is critical. There's some good practice that I've seen applied across some of the industry, indeed in my own company. What we're looking to do on some platforms is where we've got inbound passengers, once they come on, they're going into cabins that are different from the cabins that people who have been on the platform for longer are. So we're trying to put some cabin segregation in. The key to all of this, though, is that repeated hygiene piece, the social distancing piece, and making sure that, you know, at every opportunity we're reducing the points of contact. You know, that government guidance of less than 2 meters for longer than 15 minutes piece, trying to reduce that risk exposure at every step that we take in the offshore industry. And you know, a huge thing out to the often undervalued catering crews offshore, because I know that, you know, virtually all of our catering teams offshore now are just in a persistent cleaning hygiene. You know, every touch point has been cleaned to within an inch of its life 14 times in the past 24 hours. So just to recognise their contribution.
Absolutely.
Good point. Okay. Trevor, you look like you want to add something there, or?
Well, I think Dale's had a great response. I mean, I'd just echo again the fact of the importance in terms of the, you know, the group that's coming or the team that's coming out, you know, from onshore to offshore. You know, that's why we're doing the temperature screening. That's why the questionnaire is so important. You know, so we should be confident that, you know, the outbound group are asymptomatic. But I do, you know, accept, and I think the missing piece of the jigsaw is the testing. You know, that's why we keep the government, if we can get this testing in place, if we can get the antibody testing, if we can get the swab testing back at home, I think that would be the missing piece, and I think that would give everyone so much more confidence that we're ensuring that people that are not going offshore with COVID-19. And we keep on hammering the government time after. In fact, people are just bored. Because every meeting I go to with the government, I keep on about testing, and you see their shoulders sag. But we keep on at it. We do. We really are.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah. Another simple question here, probably quite an easy answer. I am an offshore worker. When will I receive my letter confirming my key worker status to travel to Aberdeen? So I think that's someone who's waiting to come back to Aberdeen and possibly drives up, I'm not sure, and expects to get a key worker letter to accompany them the way up. Is that happening?
So there is a letter that's on OGUK letterheaded, and we've discussed that with the police. So Police Scotland are aware of that. I think it'll be downloaded from our site. It's typically signed by the employer, just to sort of give to the individual. So you need to go back to your employer and say, right, have you seen the OGUK authorization letter, if you like, because it is available to be used by anyone. And Police Scotland spoken to their counterparts in England as well.
Could I just say that a simple answer to that would be, like Trevor mentioned, the OGUK letter, just screenshot it, get it on your phone. I mean, you might not have a hard copy of a letter, but if you've got a copy on your phone, and most people have the facility to do that, would be quite a quick solution to that.
Yeah. I think there's a level of pragmatism being applied by the law enforcement agencies as well currently, where they're in the educate and encourage in the early stages, and enforcement a later option. I think people who are travelling to Aberdeen who've got their rig bag and their Vantage card in hand, it needs to be a fairly straightforward conversation with the police about where they're going and what their status is.
Thank you. Thank you. So a couple of questions on this I'm just gathering together. If a person is asymptomatic, i.e. shows no major signs of high temperature, etc., but knows he has one of those persistent coughs he's had forever, will he be stopped from going offshore? So underlying condition for months, some people have a tendency to cough, but he's tested and has no temperature.
Yeah, so I think the guidance there is it's got to be a new cough. So if you've had the cough for ages and that's just a typical sort of problem, then that's not a new cough. And there's other symptoms that you should be watching out for as well. So something that you've had for ages, no, if it's a new cough, something different, then you've got to self-isolate.
Okay, good.
Just jump on that one as well, Steve. Cannot emphasise enough that guys declare. We know it's tough times. We know everybody's up against it financially and worried about jobs and everything else. But think about what you're doing. Just absolutely declare. Please declare.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Good reinforcement. Well done, Jake. Moving towards hopefully what's coming to us in the future now, when the lockdown restrictions are lifted, what measures will the industry take to reduce the risks to our teams? What is the likely approach, and what will you do as a leadership team to address the critical risks of upmanning and removing the lockdown? I could ask that of anyone, but we'll pitch in. We'll pitch in with Craig as a senior vice president.
Yeah, so this is exactly what we're looking at right now, because there are parts of our operation that globally is starting to look at this. And you look at what's happening in China now, people are getting back to work, and I think that's something we have to keep in our heads, that there is an end to this and there is a startup process. So the thing that we're looking at is obviously around a very structured view about cleanliness, about bringing people back in phases, and then starting to build up activity in a way that can have control, that we understand the risks, and making sure that basically we don't just say, let's start again. We have to have a process that takes our time. Let's build it up slowly and make sure we don't take any shortcuts in this process, because I think actually the startup is a huge activity that we've got to really put quite a lot of thinking in, and it's something that we've now got this time to really get proactive and think about how we do it. So I think it's take our time, go through a step process, making sure that we've got medical guidance in all of it, and then at that point we can then start to back up to the same activity levels we were at. But I don't think it's something that you do overnight. It takes a bit of time.
I would entirely agree with Craig there, and I think it's really important. We're going through such a difficult time at the moment. The last thing we want to do is, rush headfirst into reconstructing the world and put ourselves back into a place where all the hard work and pain of the last few months is wasted because we introduce a rebound risk into our critical infrastructure offshore and onshore.
Thank you.
I think we need government to play a part in this as well and serve notice, so that we've got notice of when furloughs coming to an end, because that's going to have a critical part to play in it as well. So we need government support on it.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, esteemed panelists. 5 minutes left of the panel. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Bob, just on the same sort of theme, from an inspector's point of view, how will you prioritise where you go first once your lockdown's off? Because obviously everything's been pushed back. Will you just resume normal business, or will you have prioritised some different work fronts?
So there's planned inspections that are still in the plan for this year, and as time goes on, we will see how these fit. But there will be maybe concerns, or there could be concerns coming in from the workforce about certain assets, so that would certainly push someone up the scale of where we're going, what we're looking at, and why we're looking at it. There's a number of things, but we will try to get back in a sensible way. We'll probably learn a lot we could still do remotely from what I said at the beginning about doing the remote inspections. We'll probably be able to take some things from that, but you'll never beat the actual fruits offshore, boots on offshore, and going seeing things and speaking to people face to face and looking at the pieces of kit that you're looking at. So it will be a phased return, but I don't have all the details on that at this time. We're still planning on what we're doing at this exceptional time, opposed to on the way out, that I know about anyway. Maybe the higher up the tree know more than me on this.
Thank you, Bob. So as we approach the 1 hour session, I just want to give the panelists an opportunity to give what they would see as their most critical advice to everyone on this, and I think much of it will be around work as a team, work together. But Jake, what's the key message you'd like to land with the people that have dialed in today?
Well, communicate, report, challenge, but accept that we're never going to get this 100% right, because it's a first. We've never been here before. This is new to everybody, and I'm not trying to defend bad practice. I'm simply saying that we've got to learn, and I think we are learning as we move through this, virtually hour by hour. Everything that can be done is being done in terms of making representations on behalf of the workforce, dealing with your concerns, raising your concerns. I'm sure Trevor will confirm that. He's getting a lot of earache from the trade unions. We're learning here, so be patient but be safe, and as I say, report. That's critical. Do the right thing, do the self-isolation piece, do the social distancing, and report, please. Thank you,
Jake. Craig, what other advice if you would just echo Jake's?
I think Jake's probably said everything, but it is listen, it is learn, it is actually realise that there's a big community out there that needs your support and for you to do the right thing. As I say, I think the industry will come out of this stronger, because hopefully we can build the relationships that we need to be successful going forward. But we're all learning. This is something we've never experienced. So I think that's the key thing, is listen, learn, and make sure you do the right things.
Thank you. Dale, anything you would add to the comments we've had so far?
Yep, and I echo the previous comments, but the one thing I will add from an offshore perspective is help look after your colleagues' well-being. This is a hugely demanding time on us. Being in an offshore environment is demanding. We're away from home, we're away from our families. There's obviously lots of things happening. A vast majority of our workforce are blokes, and I know being one of them, we're sometimes bad at actually talking about our concerns and fears amongst our colleagues. Have that open dialogue. If somebody's looking like they're in a space where they're not dealing with something quite well, go up and have the conversation. Let's not make this really difficult situation worse by failing to look after each other's mental health.
Thank you. Bob, you had your comments just beforehand there. Do you want to add anything just now?
I would just reiterate, agree with what's been said, but also, as I mentioned a little bit before, safety reps, this is your time to stand up and play your part and be seen to be involved, get active, make sure you've got the support, cooperate, know the roles and reasons why you're there, and play your part and do it.
Thank you. Trevor, I deliberately left you last because I know your shoulders are very broad, but they're being pounded every day. So what would your advice be if there's any one message you could land with the entire audience today?
There's a few messages, although, Jake keep on kicking my shins after a while. But I mean, first of all, recognise you're doing incredible jobs. You really are, and it's just a shame when everyone's clapping the NHS. Part of me's clapping you because I worked offshore as well, and I know how tough it is being away from family and friends, etc. But recognise you are, and I think that's fully appreciated as well. I think this element of take accountability, because it's not all what I could do, it's what each individual can do. So take accountability. But also, I think it was called in the early days a novel coronavirus for a very good reason, that we'd never seen it before, and none of us have seen this, never. And I certainly can't get it all right. No one can get it all right all the time. If you see things that don't seem to be right, then please feed it back through the safety reps, through the OEMs, to Steve, to me. I don't care, however it comes in. Keep on feeding it back, because your feedback helps us then at least go and discuss it with operators, with contractors, or whatever. And working together, I think we'll get through this.
Thank you, gents. Now, I'd just like to say thank you to you all for your input and for taking the time. Yes, Jack, I'll come to you and you can close. Oh.
No, it's just to say thanks to Emily, because without Emily's help, we wouldn't have got this done, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to mention
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks for getting it to me. So thanks to the panelists for taking part. I think the message is clear. We have to work together. Don't underestimate the effort that's going in to try and make this a successful outcome in the end. And we will come through it, but just keep communicating and keep in touch and play your part and keep safe. Thank you to all. I think I hand back to Emily.
Yep, thank you very much, everybody. I've been inundated with your questions coming in, so thank you again for all them. The recording will be available afterwards in a follow-up email, so if any of your colleagues wanted to watch this but couldn't dial in, then you can reassure them they can still watch your esteemed panel afterwards. But thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.